Hey guys, it's Brooke. Welcome to Inside Renovation. So excited about this episode. Pastor Cody's wife, Jessica, is joining us, our very first guest on the podcast. And it's such a good episode. We had to split it into two parts. So welcome to part one. I feel like I'm with mom and dad right now on the podcast. I'm so excited. Jess is our very first guest on the podcast.
Let's go.
Huge round of applause.
Thank you.
We're going to do a little icebreaker because I just feel like, you've never been on the podcast before. So I want you, Pastor Cody, to tell us your favorite thing about Jess.
Ooh.
I put him on the spot, y'all.
No, I'm not trying to think about what I want to say. I think obviously she's beautiful on the outside, but she's her ability to genuinely care for people and like do so much outside of herself. Like she's the most serving person I know.
So good.
That's my favorite thing about her.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
Sorry for putting y'all on the spot. Now you got to say something you love about
She's
Cody.
super hot. That's what I was just trying to keep
so
it like, trying to keep it, not vain, but.
I would say, I got several favorite things about him. I love that he is who he is on stage is who he is off stage and at home. You get what you get with him. He is authentic. He's genuine. He really cares for people so well, including me.
Mm-hmm.
He is such a good and faithful and loving husband. That's a lot, but
I appreciate that.
So good.
Let's
This is
go.
our podcast on marriage, by the way, if you didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
But we wanted to bring Jess in because I just think that this is such a cool perspective to talk about because I feel like there's so much pressure. Obviously, Pastor Cody deals with, we've talked about this on the podcast, of the pressures of being a pastor and some of those like struggles that can happen with that. But also, you deal with different set of struggles being a pastor's wife and the pressure that comes along with that. But then also just kind of like what healthy marriage looks like and just really talking through some of those real, vulnerable moments here on the podcast. So I'm pumped about this. When you guys look at your marriage as a whole, when you guys think about when you first met, is there a specific memory that comes to mind where you're like, that's when I knew?
I know. I want to hear your response, though. I want to hear your response.
I'm wondering how far back you're going to go. For me, so I know that it was right before I graduated nursing school, and I was in town visiting my parents in Mount Juliet. That's our hometown. And I ran into his mom randomly, and it had been years since I had seen her and him. And she was like, "Hey, it's so good to see you. Have you talked to Cody anytime recently?" And I was like, no, not at all. And
Friend zoned him 4 years ago. Nope.
And so I had been going through a bad breakup at the time, and something that, I'd ended, and I just knew it wasn't the direction that God had for me. And so I was in a season of limbo. And so I just took it as whenever I saw her, I was like, wow, this is random. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I reached out to him that night on Facebook. And he was like, wait, no, wait.
No, I'm about to say, you reached out to me on Facebook.
No,
You
I did
text me.
not. I looked you up on Facebook first.
And you text me.
To see if you were single.
I don't think I've told
Shout
you
out
that.
to
Facebook
Oh,
status.
I didn't even know that.
That's what I did. Yes, I did.
That's awesome.
Because I wasn't going
go.
to reach out. Yeah. Anyways.
So you had intentions the whole time.
So I kind of did a little bit. Yeah,
She's never told me that.
Revealed on the
Literally
podcast.
have never heard this
Inside
before.
Renovation, y'all. I love
Inside edition. And so I text him and I said, "Hey, I can't really remember."
You said, "Hey," I remember
but
you
was
said,
like, "Hey, how are
Hey,
you?
how are you? This is Jessica."
Yeah, and he said, "Jessica who?" And I got offended. I was like,
Like, you
"What
don't
do
have my
mean,
number
Jessica
saved?"
who?" And I told him, and he immediately called me.
Yeah.
And then literally we were on the phone for like 4.5 hours.
Yep.
And I just remember whenever I talked to him, I could tell a difference, like a transformation in his life. Not that he was a bad guy when I knew him in high school, but just a difference. And I knew with hearing his story and coming to know Jesus, I was like, your life is completely different. You're a different person than what I knew back then, and super attractive to me. And I was like, that's the kind of man that I want.
Yeah.
And
Come on now.
yeah, and so the rest is history. It was a short on ramping from there. So I feel like we dated pretty quickly after that.
We did. In the third date, the hook was set. It was. Don't
Wait,
lie.
tell us about the third
The
date.
third date. Okay, so the first date we had, it was like I pulled the, hey, let's just catch up just as friends, because backstory, we were friends in high school. And I'll get to that in a second. Let me tell you about the date first, and then I'll kind of back up.
Okay.
So we were friends in high school, and I always had a crush on her. She friend zoned me. We kind of talked, but not really. We never kissed or made anything official, like nothing like that. And so the first date, I pulled the whole like just as friends thing. So we go, I'm so embarrassed to even say this now because downtown is so much cooler now. And I've never taken her there since. I don't even think it's there anymore. They tore it down. Hard Rock, it's gone, right?
Maybe
I don't know.
Hard Rock, like downtown, the restaurant, Hard
Like on
Rock
Broadway.
Cafe
Oh,
on
no,
Broad.
it's still there. Is
it
It's
still
still
there?
there.
It's still
Okay,
there.
okay. So I took her there because I didn't know where else to go. I'd never been downtown. Last time I was in Nashville
dated at the
downtown was like
Hard
I was
Rock.
18.
Yeah.
So took her to Hard Rock. Then we went down by the river, and it was one of those like we were definitely like connecting at dinner and stuff like that. And I think she thought for sure I was gonna try to kiss her, by the river, and I didn't. So then we hung out literally the next night, and I don't remember what we did the second night. Do you? I don't think I remember the second night. But then the second night we were together, and there was a little bit like she was throwing a couple signs.
Yeah.
And I didn't kiss her again.
Let's go.
And I could sense that it was frustrating her a little bit.
She was like, what are you doing?
You're gonna make a move.
And then the third date was when we danced, right?
yeah, in the garage.
My stepdad lived in this house up on this hill in Lebanon, and I think there was literally a deer hanging there the day before. And for whatever reason, we just there was country music on, and we started, I just pulled her up and I was like, come on, let's dance. And just kind of goofing off. It wasn't anything super over, romantic slow song, but we were just dancing. And I think that's the moment she knew we were getting married.
Yeah, I was
Right?
like, this is the moment. I love you. And it was only like a week. And yeah.
That was
I
it.
like,
And then
that's
your
the
family,
moment.
my family, they thought we were
They
crazy.
thought we were crazy.
Really?
Yes,
yeah.
all my good friends. I mean,
They were like, "You're crazy."
Friends to this day, they, that I have a lot of, respect for, and I listen to, and they're like, "What are you doing? Have you lost your marbles?" Basically, and I was like, "Y'all, you gotta just trust me."
Yeah.
And so
He's the one. So for me, I literally think again, there were relationships, whatever, between all that, but it was one of those things, like when I was in high school, my mom told me, like, if there's going to be a girl you married from high school, I want it to be her.
Wow.
And I was like, me too. Like, I'm down. Like, I am
Yes.
down. So I remember we were talking about it before this. You were talking about the whole Reba McEntire and Sonic and her boyfriend. And I had this like, oh yeah. Like, I remember the real first moment I really remember. There was a time I think we went to Kroger and to bake some cookies, really to make your ex-boyfriend jealous.
Yeah, I did that on purpose.
Yeah, you did. You took me to Kroger and like pranced me around, even though
I
you're
had a
just
mission.
friends and
Sometimes
whatever.
it'd be like that.
But then, like, the
It
next
really
moment I
is.
really remember from high school was when we were 15. I was 15. She was 16. My brother had just died. I was at the funeral. It was visitation. Funeral's next day. Been there for 2 days, completely exhausted and emotionally just like gone, and hurting and pain and angry and all of that. And she showed up to my brother's visitation, and she's like, "Hey, do you just want to go get some eat and just like take a break?" And I was like, "Sure." And so I rode with her, and she drove me to Sonic in Old Hickory, and we sat there and had Sonic. And I knew back then. I was like, man. And then she just freaking friends on me for 4 years. I tried. I made moves. I grabbed her butt in the pool.
That was super awkward. I
That
still
didn't
remember
work.
that.
Like, it's like I made every move I knew to make in every way. There was one super awkward night. Like, her boyfriend broke up with her, and she's like, I just wish I could still remember it. We're in my front yard, and it's night, and she's been hanging out, and she shows up to my house, and she's crying. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? I just wish that I could find a guy who would love me or treat me like I treated him. And I was like, I mean, I'll be that guy. Like, and it was like, one of the,
said that?
yeah, I was like,
Super cringy,
well, I would be. And she's like, yeah, I gotta go. And just like dipped. And I was like, oh, so that was like the official, like I'm in the freaking friend zone. And I tried to break out and all that stuff, and nothing worked. So
wasn't it funny?
Jesus worked later on in life.
I feel like
thank God.
I'm hearing all this, and it's just like we had talked before in a different episode of the podcast about like how there's just so much like beauty in the waiting and like patience and things like that, and how God was just like, not yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, you knew.
I would have screwed it up so bad.
That's what he would say.
If she would have given me a shot, it would have been like over. And knowing her, she'd have been like, and never again.
Right.
Like she would have been like, nope, tried that. I'm out. Like, I don't, great. You love Jesus. Good for you, buddy. Like it would have never worked.
Well, and I think it's just such a great story of like something you might want right at this moment. God's just saying not yet. And
there you go,
because
Brooke.
you don't have
Come
it
on
now, it's like, you know, I mean, look, now you have 3 beautiful boys.
Preach, girl.
Like, I am so excited to continue to talk about this because I know that when it comes to being on, I guess, like a platform, right? Like being a pastor of a church, being the pastor's wife in this unit of like leading a city.
Yeah.
The pressure that goes along with that, and then also keeping yourself healthy, because I think, you know, when you're a pastor of a church, you want your church healthy, you want the people around you healthy, but like this is the most important part.
Yeah.
What do you guys do to keep that healthy? Like, what do you guys do? The time you set aside to each other, what are those things that you tangibly are like each week, like, okay, we got to make this happen. We got to like well check each other. Like, what are some of the things that you guys do together to kind of, you got to keep the unit going?
You want to answer that first? Do you want me?
I would say, you know, he does a really good job at protecting our time together. And so we will always get time for date night. So I know like once a month we at least make it happen of a date night.
Once a month?
At least. That's what I'm saying. At least. But you do more than that.
I was about to say.
It's like every other week.
Yeah.
But depending, but the third child recently.
That's been a different season.
That's changed a little bit.
But we get like a night with just one kid, and that feels like a date.
And that feels
Monday nights. It's like we only got one kid. It's like that's easy. You know what I'm saying?
By the way, they send to the parents' house. Okay, grandparents are watching the kids. While they get a night off.
That's right. Yeah,
it's worked out well.
But you're right. But you're about right. 2 or 3 times. Once or twice a month with like 0 kids right now.
And that really helps too, of just us kind of just, I mean, because it's hard, right? When you have kids and you're trying to sit around the dinner table and you're talking about your day, and it's hard because you can't even hardly get out a full sentence. And so I think that's been really important for us to protect that time with each other, just so we can go out to dinner and just have a normal conversation. And that really does a lot for your time and your relationship with each other, just to have that time to decompress and just to have that time with each other. What else, babe?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's a little bit of like a system to my secret, a little bit. And I've told it to her before. It's like the 7-7-7 rule. So it's like, all right, every 7 days, I got to get her on a date. You know, every about 7 weeks, it's got to be a day, like where I try to get her away for an entire day, and we're spending more than just a couple hours. And then every 7 months, we're getting a trip where it's just me and her for like 2 or 3 days without kids. And then like every year, we'll go on a family trip as well. So that's kind of just been like, I try to live by that. I don't live by it perfectly. I try to live kind of by that 7-7-7 rule. Why 7-7-7? I don't know. It just sounds like a holy number to me. So that's what I rock with. You know, it's better than 666. So you know what I'm saying? It's like, so 7-7-7. The other thing I think in that too is like, I hear people all the time, we can't afford date night. We can't afford that, can't afford that, can't afford that. It's like, no, you can't not afford that.
Right.
You know, and for me, like I do our budget. And so the first thing I prioritize is giving to God, and the second thing is giving to her.
Yeah.
And so I just make sure like that's in, like even before I pay my bills and mortgage, you know what I mean? It's like, we got to pay our bills and mortgage, but it's just a mental thing I do. It's like, all right, I got to figure out how much can we really do this month in eating out, going on wherever, you know? So, I think that's a practical one for us. I think for me, I also like daily, and there are times, and I wish this was true. Like, oh, we pray together every day.
Yeah.
We don't. But I do pray for her every day. And that is there's not a lot of things I can say I've done consistently without stopping over the years. But praying for her daily is one of them that I can like hang my hat on of like, no, that's priority for me. I don't know how else to say it. So, and I believe that there's something God does in my heart when I pray for her. So, you know, over the years, I've had to offer forgiveness to her a lot. I'm just kidding.
Bro, I was like,
but I was totally joking. It's completely the opposite. But I will say that the way anytime we're in an argument, when I find myself praying for her, because like it's hard to pray for somebody when you're mad at them. You know what I'm like?
That'll preach itself right there.
It's hard. And I'm like, especially at night, like if we're like just got into an argument or a bicker, you know, we're bickering back and forth or whatever. It's like, all right, I'm gonna pray for this girl right now, and I don't feel like it, you know.
Yeah.
But typically, when I do, is then an apology's coming right after it usually, because it's just like God does something in my heart, and I'm like, biggest blessing I've ever been given.
Yeah.
You know, so it just like softens my heart, puts things into perspective a little bit, and makes it a lot easier to just like resolve conflict and forgive and all that. So,
well, and I feel like marriage nowadays, like it's such a hard thing when the world is just so cool with like divorce and it's just leave them like
divorce parties.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, it's such a like celebrated thing now. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the things that like we were taught growing up, like my parents were always just like, it's your choice. Like marriage isn't but rainbows and butterflies all the time, right? Yeah. Marriage is a choice to stay, a choice to continue to love them through the ugly, a continued choice to say like, I'm going to wake up today and even though I might not like you, I still love you, right? Yeah. And there's like extenuating circumstances, obviously, like that can call for divorce, but I am curious as to know like conflict, right? People are like ready to just throw it up and be like, no thanks, see you later. Like, and you know, you're like, I'm praying and I'm feeling a little bit of this like calmness now. Like I can now apologize. When you guys get in those arguments where it's just, I mean, you're breaking and you're like, I can't do this. Like, this is hard. Mm-hmm. What are some of the ways that y'all kind of like come together and maybe communicate? Or, I mean, we're getting real on the podcast today, okay? Because these are relationships and it is real. And just because you guys run a church, you know, and pastor a church doesn't make you any different than anybody else, especially when it comes to marriage and the hardships that come along with it.
Absolutely. I think that I've had to work on this a lot over the 10 and a half years we've been married.
Because I've made her mad a
lot. And my thing is not so well communicating, and it's more like stuffing it and then becoming like a historian with it to where it like builds up, and then you just pop off over like maybe the smallest trigger. Yeah. And then they're like, what the heck did I do? Yeah. Like, what do you mean? And so, I did that for a long time, and it was very destructive, to be honest. And so, we came to agreement, like because there was a time when it was like threatened divorce because that was a trigger, and to where he really knew I was serious. Yeah. And that's so super unhealthy. Right. And so, we came to the agreement like, hey, I'm going to try and communicate better. I'm going to try not to be an historian and, get all this stuff, piled up and then pop off at some very small thing. And I'm not going to threaten divorce, because that's really that's something that's super unhealthy to do. And so it's taken us a long time. It's taken me a long time over the years to grow in that.
You're going to be in a fight tonight.
Just kidding. Okay. She knows I'm playing.
But we did we did a talk on this.
We did a sermon on that during COVID. We did a sermon on fighting rules. And we talked about not getting historical. Which we really fight to not do. Divorce is not an option, so we took that off the table. The other one's fighting in front of our kids. I saw that a lot growing up, and just don't want to go down that route. Another one was name calling. It's never worked out for me when I have unfortunately called her anything that would be descriptive of an animal. It just doesn't work well. Like. It feels good in the moment, you know what I'm saying? But like,
or the implication of
or
that.
the implication. Both ways though. Yes. or a body part or anything like that. Like that's just we've kind of
We're getting real
for
on
whatever
this.
reason
100%.
that doesn't really help the argument very
Well,
well.
No, for sure.
It feels like it does in the moment, but
But it doesn't.
yeah.
Yeah, so we just kind of put in like I think now it's just become this like I don't know, it's almost become these like unspoken rules that we have. So when we talk about them, it's like, oh, you broke a rule. It's more of just like we've just learned to kind of not do them, And so I think for us that's been healthy and helpful for us. And I would just encourage people like lay some fighting rules down, because the truth is it's not like if you're going to fight, it's when you're going to fight.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things God's taught me is your spouse is not your enemy. And we spend so much time fighting against when really it's like you can fight me versus her, or we can fight us versus the real enemy.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm fighting for her and with her, not at her. Like she's not my enemy. We're on the same team. So I think getting over we all want to win and we always want to prove our point. And that's probably where I'm guilty of, because I'm good at talking, and so that's my strength. I'm good with words, right? She's really good with memory and I'm not. I can memorize sermons,
Right.
but that girl has like, oh, I know what you did 6 months ago in 4 days.
Girl, same.
And
Yep.
you want to talk to me about that? I got you. And like, so it's like, I can argue with the best of them, but she's so good at pulling history that like, it can be a deadly combination,
Right.
So opposites attract
Totally.
and they attack. And so for us, we've just had to kind of go, okay, we see things a little bit differently. And so anyway, I think that, I think for us, it's just been really good. And I would encourage people like, you're gonna fight.
Yeah.
So you just got to figure out, all right, what makes sense for us. And, you're not my enemy.
Somebody once told me, like, back in the day, right before Andrew and I got married, we're like, give us the best, marriage advice. What are you going to give us? Yeah. And the one that stuck with us is you got to learn to fight. And that's what you're basically saying. Like, you just have to learn what works for you, because what works for y'all might not work for somebody else. And it's just like,
that's good.
Every fight's going to come differently for each couple, but learning how you fight together and how you can get through that together is such a big part of marriage, because people are like, I can't wait to get married. It's going to be the best thing ever. And it is, but it's also the hardest.
It is.
Right.
Because there's not a single person in your life that you like all the time.
Nope.
So it's like, but not, you're having to do life with this person all the time.
I like you all the time.
Good answer.
Yes, good answer.
I really do.
But
99% of the time.
Yeah.
I like her a lot.
But I think it's really important to have these conversations, to be honest and real, because I feel like sometimes when it comes to like, people on the outside looking in, they're like, wow, they must have the most perfect life and all this stuff. And it's like, we're all broken.
Yeah.
We all have the same,
We're far from perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got to give one more fighting rule that I didn't say, because I actually it's the obvious one. So like I've heard, well, what about, don't go to bed when you're angry. And they use that scripture. Right. Yep. And so like, there's a lot of nights the best thing either of us can do is to freaking sleep on it.
Yep.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, you're going to bed angry. That's, you shouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, ideally. But what Paul's actually getting at when he writes that, it says, in your anger, do not sin. And he says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, and give the devil a foothold. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes what we have to, and I have to do, is like, there's a certain level of resolve before I go to bed. Of like, divorce isn't an option. Like we still haven't come to a conclusion yet. We haven't come to the solution yet.
Right.
We will. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, there's still conflict. But really, I think what Paul's getting at when he writes that is that the idea of giving the devil a foothold and not letting the sun go down is really this idea of a foothold as a place. Mm-hmm. And it's a fortified place in your home. And it's and what he's really getting at too is like to allow a season of, or a time frame where you stay angry and unforgiveness is in the house. You're giving the devil a place in your house. You're giving him a guest room. Yeah. And it's interesting because he uses the word the devil there, not Lucifer, not Satan, not the enemy. Mm-hmm. He uses the word the devil, which is diablos, which is the accuser. Mm-hmm. So literally when you are going to, when you don't resolve conflict and you don't choose to forgive and you allow unforgiveness in the home, you're inviting the devil to come in and accuse your spouse.
Wow.
And accuse you. And all he is doing, he's the father of lies, and he's speaking lies to you.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the time, the reason relationships get really conflicted is because, man, we've allowed the accuser to stay in the room next to us.
Yeah.
And it's really one of those things where if you start going and sleeping in a different room, you better be careful, because you might be sleeping in the bed with the devil.
Yeah.
Accusing
True.
everything about your spouse, and you're going to believe those lies.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to fight them at least. So,
Right.
Man.
anyway.
So good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's real stuff. I mean, Andrew and I, we've been married for 3 years, so we're still kind of in the beginning stages, right? And had a daughter really early on. So all these things, like, you're depositing so much wisdom and knowledge, because it's like, I am that person that he can go to bed and he can wake up the next morning and be like, hunky dory, everything's fine. Me, I'm just like, we're not done here. You know what I mean? And it's like, listening to these things, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's like the enemy really does have a hold on your mind when it comes to that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and just really is like, when you have an anointing in a relationship, I also feel like you have a bigger target on your back, to where it's
For
like,
sure.
he's going to try and wedge into you and break it apart. But
Well, you don't just
so
sweep it
good.
under the rug, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't just go away because you put it under the rug, you know,
Right.
and don't address it. But there are times where it's like, man, we get we bicker and fight and whatever, just like any other couple.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's over something dumb, small, and we're both exhausted and
And you wake up
tired.
the next morning and you're like, what did we even
What?
fight
Yeah.
about?
And that's why I'm like, some people are like, oh, don't go to bed. It's like, listen, hey, we'll talk about this in the morning. I love you. We're going to go to bed. And it's like, and we're not going to bed necessarily angry. Just because the conflict didn't get resolved doesn't mean I'm so
Right.
angry about it. It just means, no, that's something we really need to work through. But most of the time we wake up and I'm like, I love you. I'm sorry. It's like, I love you too. And like, we're good. You know, like we don't have to have a therapy session every little time we get into every single argument, because there's trust there.
Yeah.
And I make the assumption about her of like, that probably came from a place of she was just tired.
Totally.
She's just frustrated. I didn't freaking take out the trash again, and I didn't pick up my laundry, and I left wet clothes in the washer, and now she's pissed. And so, you know what I'm saying? And it's just
Are
like,
you Andrew? Girl. Oh my goodness.
and so it's just like, it's just one of those, you know, no, I'm a man.
Are they all like this? Are you like this?
So anyway, that's kind of, it's just my two
Funny.
cents.